Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris, for that. And thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon for the Adult Education APPG session, Creating Opportunities, the Impact of Adult Education. Just a few things to mention. If people have got questions at this stage, if you want to put them in the chat, that would be great. And when we get to the discussion part of the meeting, you could either raise your virtual hand or put it into the chat. And we're going to be, the WEA will be tweeting during and after the meeting you the hashtag adult education. So anybody who wants to also tweet using that hashtag would be really welcome. We've got three fantastic speakers today. We've got Sam Winder of the Learning and Work Institute, we've got Simon Parkinson of the WEA, and we've got Jim Goddard-Jones from Lloyds Banking Group. So today, the theme of today's meeting is how adult education has impacts and how it supports progression. We know that adult education participation is still uneven and that not every part of society engages in it to the same degree. But for those who do participate, the experience is almost always positive and can lead to significant progression. The Skills Bill, currently before the House of Commons, focuses on progression into work and the economic value of post-16 learning. There are crucial skills gaps, not only in technical sectors, but also in essential skills, in literacy, numeracy, and digital skills, and also in the skills that employers value for things such as teamwork, communications, and critical thinking. Community adult learning has a key role in advancing these kinds of skills. In the spending review and other recent announcements, there's been little indication as to how adult education will be supported into the future. Today, we will hear the latest research on participation levels. We'll hear from the WEA on how adult learning is creating opportunities and changing lives. And we'll hear from the Lloyds Banking Group on why employers value adult learning. And we can also look at the skills and post-16 education budget, which is beginning its committee stage in the House of Commons today. There's an awful, very packed agenda. I have to apologise in advance if I have to leave to vote. I do apologise, and we'll find someone to take over the chairing meeting. Hopefully that won't happen, and I can stay for the duration. So our first speaker is Sam Winder. Sam is Deputy Director of the Learning and Work Institute, and she's going to speak for about 7 minutes, focusing on the most recent Learning and Work Institute participation survey. As Deputy Director, Sam focuses on making an impact on policy and practice through the Learning and Works Institute's research into learning, skills and employment. She was previously Director of Policy for Impetus, specialising in education and employment support for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Sam co-founded the Youth Employment Group, bringing together key leaders and experts around the youth employment sector to help drive the UK's response, which she co-chairs. She's previously been head of policy at URSA, the representative body for the employment support sector, and led the public affairs team for employment and skills providers in the private and charity sectors. Sam is a Go Lab Fellow of Practice 2021 and a mental health first aider. Over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. That was nearly longer than my presentation. So I know we've got a packed agenda for the meeting and not too much time. So hopefully, if we can get the slides up, is everybody able to see the slides? And I shall go through a set of slides this morning. Really happy to join you. For those of you who I haven't met before, hi, I am Sam Winder from Learning and Work Institute. I'm going to do a quick run through of our latest adult participation survey. Some of you may have seen that we published this very recently, just a couple of weeks ago, but some of you may not. And I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what it says about participation in learning by adults and a bit of a detailed breakdown, particularly around who participates in learning and who doesn't, which I think is very pertinent to our discussions today. This is the 25th year of our adult participation in learning survey. We've been running them since 1996 at the Learning and Work Institute on an almost annual basis. So we can look at each year individually and we can compare our findings this year to our longer term trends, which will hopefully be helpful. So let's move on to the first slide. Just to talk about the survey, we take a very broad definition of learning, which I know will, people will have their thoughts on that. We include a wide range of formal and non-formal and informal learning, so much wider than just what's publicly funded in terms of provision. We take a representative sample, around 5,000 adults, 17 and over across the UK. And then historically, we've conducted this survey face-to-face. Last year, that wasn't possible because of the pandemic, so we did it via the telephone. That's important because there are some different results from last year, which we can put down to that. And then this year, we've conducted it online, and the results are much more comparable with other trends. So we can start to draw those trends through. Let's go on to the next slide. So the 2021 survey, that shows that a quarter of adults are currently learning, a further 19% having done so in the last 3 years. So that's what our survey found overall. Just over a quarter of adults say they've not taken part in learning since leaving full-time education, while the same proportion have done so but over 3 years ago. Throughout the presentation, I'll refer to the participation rate, and lots of you will know what that means, but that's basically the proportion of adults who say they are either currently learning or have done so in the last 3 years. And so this year, that participation rate stands at 44%. Next slide. So digging into the details a little bit more, we've got quite a lot of information in this one. So this chart shows the participation rate for each year the survey's been carried out, and that's why you can see there's a bit of an erroneous, we've left last year out because the findings were so different. You can see the rate's fairly stable over time, around 2/5 of adults saying they're currently learning or have taken part in learning over the last 3 years. We saw a sharp decline between 2017 and 2019. So the 2017 survey showed the lowest participation rate in the history of the survey, just 37% of adults. The 2018 survey then found an even lower rate of 35%, and then it dropped to 33% in 2019. Our 2021 survey this year shows the highest level of participation in recent years. It's much more in line with what we were seeing in the 2000s. That rise in participation, the data doesn't tell us exactly why, but it may relate to the pandemic, people taking up learning through the pandemic. It could be the difference between the survey method, so surveying people online rather than face-to-face, it could be to do with that, but we're going to be doing the survey from here on online, so we will be able to take that as a base rate from now on, so we'll be able to see the trends from here on in. Next slide. Thank you. Age. So just to briefly talk about age, age has a strong effect on participation. The younger you are, the more likely you are to learn. I think most of us know that. It's been consistent throughout the surveys. Just half of adults aged 35 to 44 have taken part in learning in the last 3 years, and that drops to 40% of adults aged 45 to 54. So in the context of all of us aging, an aging society, particularly extended working lives, we need to consider that age effect about how we engage adults throughout their lives and careers into later life. So it's something that we do need to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Now, this is one that we really wanted to flag. In line with previous years, we've seen that social grade is a key predictor of participation in learning. So respondents from higher social grades are much more likely to participate in learning than those adults from lower social grades. What we found is over half of adults in what social grades A and B, so the top social grades, are current or recent learners. That's over half. This compares to just under a third of those in the DE, the lowest social grades. So more than twice as many adults in the DE grade have not participated in learning since leaving full-time education compared to those in the two highest A and B grades. When we compare to the 2019 survey, participation across social grades has increased or been maintained. So while overall participation has increased that we saw on that previous slide, actually the gaps in participation haven't narrowed alongside it. Next slide, please. Disparities by employment status. We wanted to pull this out for this meeting in particular. So talking about working and employment. So the disparities by employment status have also remained or increased. The closer you are to the labour market, you're more likely to participate in learning. So full and part-time learners are the most likely. The participation rate then drops for people who are unemployed and seeking work. And again, for those who are unemployed and not seeking work, and those who are retired, they're the least likely to participate in any form of learning. Next slide, please. The age, so this is age, not the age at which you're learning, but the age compared to when you left full-time education. So the age at which you left full-time education, I should say. So the age, that's strongly associated with your likelihood to participate in learning. The later you leave full-time education, the more likely you are to learn in later life. So the longer you stay in education, the more likely you are to learn as an adult. Oh, I think somebody's just not muted there. Judy, I think that might be Judy's phone. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. Thank you. Adults who stay in education until at least the age of 21 are twice as likely to say they're learning than those who left under the age of 16. So that's a really, really big impact. It tells us that if you've benefited from education in your early life, then you're more likely to take up learning later on. Next slide, please. And then when we ask how likely people are to take part in learning in the next few years, so you know, are you likely to now take part in learning in the future? You see that those with recent experience of learning are the most likely to do so in the future. So this figure shows almost a mirror image of itself. So 4 out of 5 learners say they intend to learn in the next 3 years. 4 out of 5 people who haven't learned since leaving full-time education say they don't intend to take up learning. So while the evidence on the benefits of learning sort of demonstrate that we know that learning in adult life helps social mobility, inclusion, well-being, this evidence shows that those who participate in learning, it looks likely that those who are least likely to benefit are the most likely to take part. And those adults who are most likely to get those benefits, well-being, social mobility, are actually the least likely to take part in any form of learning. So we'll probably talk about this later on in the meeting, but if we are looking at trying to change this, we need to really understand motivations to learn and barriers to learning as well. Next slide, please. Let's just whiz through these last couple. This is about people's motivation to learn and people looking at their main reason for learning. You can see here, 54% of learners have taken up their main learning for work or their career. 44% have taken up for leisure or personal interest. Now, interesting, in this survey, respondents were far more likely to say they were taking up learning for leisure or personal interest this year. Again, that might fit with the theory that the pandemic enabled a bit more time for people to take up learning, perhaps. Whereas in 2019, that was just 20%. So that's quite a big difference. It could be related to the way that the survey's been carried out, but we'd have to look into that more closely. The table on the right hand side just shows the very many number of motivations that adults say they have to learn. They're more likely, respondents are more likely to identify motivations related to personal interests or development, 2 in 5, motivated to learn because they're interested in that subject in particular. Other common motivating factors are around getting a qualification and improving self-confidence. So you can see that there, quite a wide range of aspirations and benefits there that we can tap into. Next slide. Thank you. This is the barriers. So this is the flip side. So asking adults why there were barriers to learning if they weren't going to be learning. So it includes sort of the challenges that current or recent learners have experienced, or the adults who aren't intending to learn what they're saying they face. So we know that there are perceived situational barriers. So somebody may think that they have obstacles. There could be dispositional barriers relating to their previous experience of learning. So people who feel that they might be too old to learn could be a dispositional barrier to learning. 3 in 10 adults without recent experience of learning said that nothing's preventing them from learning. About 3 in 10 say nothing is preventing them from learning at all. It could be because it's not something they've considered before. It could be something that they're not aware of. But this is really important. I think this is a key takeaway. It's not enough just to present opportunities. It's really important, therefore, that to those adults who have no barrier to learning, it's what is the value of it, and really getting that across to people who might be, who could then consider taking on learning in adult life, and what those benefits could be. So it's really important to think about that value and why it's worth their investment. And to leave you on a positive note, the next slide. And this is some of the benefits that have been brought out in the survey of learning. We know that adults can have there can be many significant benefits for individuals: health, employment, social life, community, and each year survey respondents with current or recent experience of learning are asked to identify those benefits, and you can see some of them on this slide. The most common benefit identified this year was enjoying learning more. 1 in 5 said they improved the skills they need for a job, or that their self-confidence has improved alongside it. Other benefits are around qualifications, increased confidence at work, health and well-being, all the things that we know come along with the benefits of learning. So just to finish off on the last slide, next slide. Thank you. There's lots more in the survey to unpack. It's available on the Learning and Work website, and I'm sure we can share that with members of the all-party group. But do have a look through there, and hopefully you might pick out some other insights that provoke discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was really, really interesting and informative. I haven't been a particularly good chair thus far because I've gone slightly over on the time. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is Simon Parkinson, who's Chief Executive of and General Secretary of the WEA. Simon will also speak for about 7 minutes, and he's going to focus on the WEA's recent Creating Opportunities Impact Survey. Simon joined the WEA from Cooperative College, where he was Principal and CEO for 4 years, and he previously worked for 19 years at the Royal Mencap Society, including as Director of Education, Learning and Work. So I'm going to pass you over to Simon now, and Simon's going to begin his presentation. Thank you.
Must remember to come off mute before I share screen. You know, flying solo today, which was always going to be a big mistake. So welcome everybody. Thanks for giving your time this afternoon. I'm Simon Parkinson. As Margaret said, I'm Chief Exec and General Secretary of the WEA. And I just want to build on Sam's presentation. Actually, you know, you've got the overall trends there and the overall picture, and I want to share with you some of our experiences as the WEA in terms of what we've seen over the last 12 months, mainly through talking to our students and recording it in our impact report. So we are one of the largest education charity in the adult learning sphere across England and Scotland, and the mission is there. You know, we intend to bring adult learning within reach to the masses because we know the positive effect it has in terms of fighting inequality and promoting social justice. You know, I would argue, and I think the next slide shows this, that we're as relevant today and as needed today as we've ever been in our 120-year history. You'll see on the left there some really big numbers. These are numbers that people will recognise from various different reports. But, you know, they just jump off the screen for me. 7.1 million people, poor literacy skills. You know, 30 million people needing to be reskilled by 2030. These are massive numbers. And what we see at the WEA is the absolute power that adult learning and adult education can bring to helping some of these issues. Yeah, I think we're proud that we're working with those adults who are perhaps furthest away from the labour market. Yet 65% of our students tell us that they found work after their courses ended. But equally important to us are those big numbers down at the bottom. 81% saying that they've increased their motivation to learn and find work. You know, 96% of our students, our learners, telling us that it helps to keep their mind active. These are massive numbers, and you know, we do that in a very particular way. You know, our learner experience, you know, is built on learning environments and creating those small groups of learners that are absolutely supported by inspiring tutors, and they learn together. This is a guide by your side approach. And we've managed to transform our in-venue learning. Before the pandemic, people were traveling on average less than 3 miles to study with us, so in really small, hyper-local community venues. And we feel we've managed to replicate that online. So it hasn't just been PowerPoint presentations, videos, and answer books. It's still been that interactive learning, small groups of people with inspiring tutors coming together and learning with each other. And I'm really proud at how we've been able to do that en masse across every region in England, across Scotland, and increasingly and more recently into Northern Ireland as well. So 30,000 students, just short of 30,000 students studied with us online last year. I'm just short of 8,000 courses. These are, tremendous effort from everybody involved with the WEA. That didn't just happen by magic. There was just a ton of hard work and commitment, dedication, and creativity from all the team to move us from that hyper-local venue-based provider into the online space. But what really makes it come alive for us, and this builds on Sam's presentation as well, are those real-life learner stories. You'll see just the improvement here. You'll see it in the learner's own words. These are images and stories taken from our impact report, and you can find that impact report on the website at wea.org.uk. Just fantastic achievements. Two examples here, and we're talking a little bit today about employability and learning for employment. 2 examples in terms of Grace and Morag, just telling their own stories, talking about how they built their confidence and went on and gained employment. There isn't a level 3 qualification on this page, and that's really important that we notice that. This is about people really rebuilding their confidence and really, starting on that journey into employment. It's not about which level they came in at. Mm-hmm. And what we see, and I wanted to build on what Sam said, and I finish on a couple of slides. We think we've seen the same. Sam said there's been that little uptick in interest and participation in adult learning. I think people were referring to it as the Joe Wicks effect at the start of the first lockdown. And I think that wide definition of learning that Sam highlights is really important too. We sometimes get a little bit sniffy about informal learning. Actually, it can take loads of different forms, and we should encourage and we should celebrate learning in all its forms, not just formal accredited learning, but any adult that shows an interest and takes that important first step back into learning should be recognised and celebrated. No doubt that the lockdowns have increased the use of digital learning. We've seen that, we've felt that really strongly, but it's also exposed those issues of digital poverty and a lack of digital skills. So a real challenge for us going forward, because although we're seeing a desire from about 1/3 of our students to return to solely venue-based community and learning, we've got 2/3 of our students saying they want some type of online blended approach. So I think it's fair to say that blended learning has been embedded over the last 12 months in a way that it probably wouldn't have been if it wasn't for the pandemic, and it's here to stay. And the challenge is to make that accessible to as many people as we can. We know that the political focus on adult skills is on that level 3 qualification, that national skills fund, and that's fine. And I'm pleased that we're at a point where there is political focus and some indication of new money to fund that type of learning. But actually, that can't be at the expense of community learning. It's got to build on that. It's got to be additional funding. And we've all got a role to play in making sure that community learning is better understood and better represented, because it is misunderstood and misrepresented, time and time again, and we need to work together to sort of just smash some of those poor stereotypes, because it is the key to developing essential skills. So the WEA will be calling for additional sources of funding for ACL. That does include those that can pay for adult learning, paying in a fully funded model, but we also need to see lots more statutory funding coming forward for ACL. We think Multiply, that was announced in the budget, is a great start, but what about digital entitlement? What about a literacy entitlement, ESOL eligibility rules as well? There's some easy wins here, and it's really great to see, and I know we've got colleagues from a number of MCAs on the call this afternoon. It's great to see some of those MCAs flexing their eligibility rules now and really start trying to get underneath what will work for them in their specific region. And I think a growing awareness that these pathways from community learning into higher level technical skills are really, really important in many communities up and down the country. And the final couple of points for me, and then the ask to government, is if we are going to attract that third of people back into adult learning that say there are no real barriers to it, I think the way we present adult learning, the language we use, is really, really important. You know, in launching the Multiply programme, you know, that it was positioned as, you know, many adults having less proficient numeracy than a 9-year-old, and that one of the answers was to send them to a boot camp. That, you know, is not going to engage the adults that we see up and down the country. That type of language is not going to do it, I don't believe. So I think we need to be really careful and really positive in the way that we talk about adult skills. So much so I wouldn't even call them basic skills. I'd now call them essential skills. So again, I think there's a real onus on us all to make this environment as welcoming as we can. So finally from me, we have our current Creating Opportunities manifesto. We're asking for 5 distinct things. The 5th one on there is quite a technical piece, but we're working with both the Commons and through the Lords on the skill bill to get some recognition for SDIs back as being one of the bodies that are eligible for grant funding. So that's the technical piece. But actually 1, 2, 3 and 4 are really, really important as well. We are calling for the introduction of a distinct fund for adults who need those essential employability skills. So rather than rolling adult education budget and national skills fund into one pot, we think there needs to be a distinct fund. We are at least calling for the maintaining of the current levels of adult education funding, prioritising those towards essential skills. So national skills funding, UK shared prosperity funds, those all need to be extra funds. They can't come at the expense of the existing level of funding. There are some real quick wins for government and others in removing some of the economic disincentives for people to study. If you're on national minimum wage in a full-time job, you hit the barrier for a level 2 qualification. You're forced to pay some of that for yourself. So there's some really quick wins there. And then finally, and it comes back to that point of language, we should be launching a real positive national awareness campaign about the benefits that adult learning can bring to individuals and communities. And we should be highlighting that there is an increasing amount of financial support to do that. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through what we've seen in the last 12 months. And hopefully that has stuck something to time, Margaret, and I'll hand back to you if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Simon. Really, really good. Thanks. You've very much kept to time and an awful lot of content in there for us to think about. Our next speaker, our third speaker, is Jim Goddard-Jones, and he's Head of Customer, Product Governance and Compliance at the Lloyds Banking Group. Jim is going to speak for about 7 minutes on the importance of essential skills for employers and the partnership between Lloyds Banking Group and the WEA. So over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and really pleased to have been asked to come along today and talk about the partnership we've had with WEA, which has been going now for 6 years. Over that period, our work has grown quite a lot in scale and reach. Initially focused on supporting learners on employability skills, but also broadening out to digital literacy and access and courses across the country on English speakers of other languages. So it's become, much broader than originally set out. Over that time, the partnership has supported over 5,000 students across Scotland, England and Wales. And I think that's a pretty tremendous achievement and a great example of how 2 organisations from completely different sectors can work together for the benefit of their local communities. And win that, the importance of adult education to both of us. Over 400 of my Lloyds Banking Group colleagues have volunteered with WEA as part of our group's volunteering programme, and that includes myself, which I think is really why I've been asked to come and talk today, because I've been personally involved as a volunteer. The feedback from Lloyds volunteers has been consistently positive. Colleagues have found it very rewarding to share their skills and experiences and to support individuals from their communities. And in recent years, before lockdowns, my own involvement has been mainly with classroom-based sessions with WEA in Bristol, which I'm pleased to say, Simon, is less than 3 miles from my home. Those have been focused on skills for employability. I always found there's a really great energy in the room, a real desire. Everyone's there because they want to be there. There's a real desire to learn, and a sense of them as well working as a team, supporting each other, as well as there to listen to a tutor. Some people were there balancing their learning with a job, sometimes with 2 jobs, to give their families and themselves better opportunities in future, typically, the people that I met. I also joined an online group during lockdown, and that was a mix of people learning how to get more from their digital devices. So you can imagine the challenge of a tutor trying to help people remotely when they're all working on different devices with different levels of understanding of how those devices work. But there were some real light bulb moments. I think everyone went away with something, and very focused on what they wanted to achieve, what they wanted to do. And again, it was really clear that the people, even though they're all remotely, were all kind of enjoying working as a team, as a group, and learning from each other as well as from the tutor. In both cases, I think my role really was a sort of classroom assistant, usually working with a subset of the participants. And for me and for the hundreds of colleagues like me who volunteered, it's an opportunity to share experience of things like CV writing, presenting, using office software. And we get an insight as well into the challenges that some of our customers have in understanding and managing their financial needs. Inevitably, they talk to us about their interactions with banks and insurance companies because they're interested in what we're doing as well, and they ask us questions. It really highlights the importance of the sort of transferable skills that probably most of my colleagues take for granted around literacy and numeracy, communication, working in teams and groups, and digital skills to operate technology that's now essential pretty much for so many roles, particularly probably with that more hybrid working. And I've mentioned how lockdown moved my own involvement with WEA online, but WEA has done a phenomenal job of moving so much of their offering online, as Simon talked about just now. And that's allowed so many people to carry on learning, but also highlighted the challenges that many people still face. We've tried to work together to sort of be flexible and agile and adapt things. And we've leveraged Lloyds Banking Group's existing relationship with a digital training company, We Are Digital. And through that, we managed to provide some additional resources for WEA's national campaign around Digital Lifeline, focused on the need for education and devices and connectivity to go with it. So that's been a real success that's been made possible by the WEA, by the tutors, the staff, and community partners all working together. And at a local level during lockdown, there's been lots of small projects as well, like a couple of examples, Employability Hub in Kilmarnock, providing coaching to help people into work, and the Keep Learning project in Leicester, which is providing courses for students with learning disabilities so they can learn in a safe, engaging environment. So there's been there's probably more variety, probably because of lockdown than there was before. But finally, from a staff perspective, the last thing I wanted to mention is our cross-organisational mentoring programme, which has also continued to grow. So this is where Lloyds and WEA staff work together, learning from each other's experiences. They gain the kind of diverse viewpoints and share their skills. And currently we've got 24 pairs of mentors and mentees between Lloyds Banking Group and WEA staff. I just wanted to end with an extract of some recent feedback from one of the WEA mentees. And she said, My time put aside with my mentor is my time where I'm able to reflect on my role. She helps me find practical solutions to problems I encounter. By meeting with her on a fortnightly basis, it allows me to take a break and realise what I have achieved. And I find this very supportive. She's encouraged me to apply for another role within WEA, and I feel more confident in my decision making. And I share that really, I suppose, just, and equally there are really positive feedbacks from local colleagues involved, but I suppose it's a great example of everyone learning, not just the WA clients, but the staff on both sides as well of the partnership. So it's always great to hear feedback like that, and I can recommend that approach of mentoring between the different organisations as well. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you, Margaret.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was really fascinating, hearing the sort of kind of getting involved on both sides. I found that absolutely fascinating. Thank you for that. We now move to our question session and we have a couple of questions already in the chat. Josh Smith. Josh, would you like to ask your question directly, or would you prefer if I read it out from the screen? I can't see Josh.
Yeah, I'm happy to read out. Yeah, it's just sort of pulling on some research that we've done at UFI. So we've been looking at barriers to learning, and one of the things that we've always identified as a key barrier is confidence, and confidence in all its forms, and often feeding into all the things that you've identified, Sam, in your research. And obviously we support tech in vocational education, so we're very invested in all that tech can do. We know it can't do everything. We know it can sometimes be a bit of a barrier to learning sometimes. We just wanted to know, what does your research show about the role of tech, or what do you understand about the role of tech in overcoming some of these barriers? And in both, how can it overcome, and how is it a barrier?
Okay, Sam, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk to that. And I think there was another question, or it wasn't about tech, but it was about the confidence that was the confidence issue that was brought out in our survey. And I think this is a really key point, that it's not just about, as I said in the presentation, it's not just about providing avenues. It's about people feeling motivated and confident to use those, to use the learning that's provided, and also in a way that suits them. So I think tech is an interesting issue. I think you're right in calling it a double-edged sword. In some of our other pieces of research, particularly over the pandemic, when people have moved to hybrid or online delivery, some of it's been very effective in reaching some of the groups in a flexible way. But what we've also found is that the learning itself does need to have sort of flexible delivery models, because it's not one size fits all, and we know that, right? So you can't say it's only going to be delivered in this way, because that might be more difficult for certain groups. Even different times of the day, some people might like to pick it up at some points in the day, others in maybe modules in different ways. So flexibility is really key, and I think that applies to tech as well. Tech can sort of capture more people, but it can also divide and leave out some people that might not be so confident with tech. So I think that needs to be built into it. There are other issues as well, about bite-sized courses, and there's different things that we can think about, but I think getting around that confidence issue is key.
Thanks very much, Sam. Josh, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, no, I think that sort of chimes with what we understand. I know, so we're in our last funding round, we funded 14 organisations to go out and look at specifically confidence as a barrier and how they can tackle it. And we're funding projects that are doing things with numeracy, literacy, all sorts of different areas. And it's one of the things that I think we've learned as an organisation is not only is blended learning key, essential to any learning, you can't do it all online, you can't do it all in person, but it's the sort of clever ways that tech can be used, whether it's sort of using data and AI to identify learners who are falling behind or dropping out, or using tech to encourage different groups to engage with learning in new ways. So yeah, I think not just thinking about the really traditional ways that tech's used in schools and educational establishments, but all ways it can work in the background as well to support people's learning.
Thanks very much, Josh. That's quite a tantalising idea you've just placed in there about AI finding learners who are falling behind. I'm going to actually just ask Chris Morgan if he wanted to add anything. Your question was related. Do you want to raise anything?
No, thanks, Chair. No, I think it pretty much covered it. It's more for us is breaking that confidence barrier down for the first part of engagement. So Simon talked about in the presentation in terms of using the right language, you know, so we're looking at now how we retitle things like maths for life, maths for work. We take out words like functional, basic, etc. But, you know, it's just from the research, and, you know, I suppose confidence cut across quite a few of those barriers. It's just how, you know, from the research and from the work you've done, how we can do more to get the conversation started first, because the tutors will sell that and the venues will sell that, and the location, you know, less than 3 miles from their home will sell that. But it's actually getting over that first hurdle, you know, particularly with maths, because it is stubborn and it seems to be more accepted with adults that just not being good at maths is just okay. It's, you know, it's just, yeah, just lessons learned really, where we can take on board, and, you know, and follow that similarly with Josh as well. I know you mentioned numeracy, so whether there's some overlap with digital.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. I can't see any other hands up, so I have now a message suggesting Baroness Gardens join us. I can't actually see. Oh, I can see that you're there, but you've...
Yes, sorry.
That's, hello. Wondered whether you might want to speak about what, well, the question is...
The skills bill.
Skills bill, and what you would like to see Commons state.
Yes, I apologise for arriving late. You changed the time of this meeting, and I was already committed to an all-party parliamentary group for apprenticeships. So I've just given them sort of 25 minutes and then switched over to see how you're getting. Yes, we had some really serious concerns about the skills bill, I have to say. One of them is about the continuation of BTECs. As you know, the government is obsessed by its T levels, which are untried and untested, and nobody knows what they're about. But the suggestion was that they were going to stop funding BTECs in order to give T levels a really good chance of success, which we were desperately opposing, because BTECs are understood by candidates, by parents, by employers, by universities. And we really see no sense at all in stopping those. And we think that's going to be really damaging to youngsters who want to go a work-based route. You know, we're relying on you in the Commons, Margaret, to sort of keep that battle up, I think. They've now agreed that they'll keep funding BTECs at least for 1 year. But as I pointed out to the Skills Minister last week, that's no use at all. You know, colleges have got to plan for longer than 1 year. You can't be doing that. We had quite a lot of other problems about careers guidance, inevitably, about ELQs, you know, and the fact that that people can't study for an equivalent or lower level qualification. So we're fighting that one as well. I'm just trying to think what else. Oh, yes, quite a long discussion on LSIPs and whether they were actually working properly. And we're not also convinced by this bill that they've really understood the implications for SEN students as to, you know, what's going on there. But it's mainly, well, it is post-16, so obviously it does include adults as well. We had a minor success. One of my colleagues has been waging a tremendous battle against essay mills, which, you know, sort of pernicious. And the government has, this is Mike's story, he got a panorama program on these a while ago too, but the government has now agreed that these are something that they must put a stop to and must try and concentrate on. So that was a minor success in amongst, but you will find that we defeated the government on any number of occasions. But one of the problems is that the Conservative majority in the Commons is now so big that they just ignore the Lord's amendments and they just vote them down without really thinking that sometimes we have some pretty bright ideas, really. Oh, credit transfers is something else on that. And careers, of course, there's a constant problem, isn't there, about getting proper careers education in schools. I think, I can't quite remember what else we discussed. We certainly spent hours and hours discussing it, but I've gone on to other things, lifelong learning. we had Kenneth Baker, you know, who's passionate about university technical colleges, who absolutely slaughtered he waded into them, you know, with all fists flying to say they were doing incredibly damaging things. So, you know, for me as a Liberal Democrat, it's always quite heartening when a Conservative starts laying into the government. You feel it makes our job that much easier. But no, I don't know if there are other things, Margaret, that you wanted to pick up on that.
No, that was really helpful. Thank you. I wondered if perhaps we could broaden it to people present at the meeting, whether people have concerns that they've got about this bill that they'd like to share.
Yes, it would be very helpful to hear if you have, because it will
really,
obviously, it will come back to us. I mean, undoubtedly we'll have ping pong on this, because the Commons are nowhere they're going to accept all the myriad defeats that we inflicted on them. So we'll end up with a cheery battle going backwards and forwards.
But at this juncture, I wonder if Baroness Garden, you might take over the role of the chair.
Oh, have you got to? Yes. Oh, well,
vote.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank all our speakers. It's been so interesting. I'm very disappointed to have to go, but I have to. Thank you all.
Well, I'm very disappointed I didn't get to hear them all, you see, but if you will go and change the times of your meeting, just when I got my afternoon schedule, so that I had 4 consecutive all-party parliamentary groups at consecutive hours. So I was doing so well, and then you went and changed the time. Anyway, yes, okay. So who would like to come in on, yes, any hands up or any comments that people would like to make on the things that have gone before? I was extolling the virtues of WEA recently. I was at a meeting of the Chartered Institute of Further Education, and I was pointing out how incredibly important WEA had been in the early part of the 20th century, wasn't it, that you were created? Right.
Baroness Garden, if I might, Fiona Aldridge from West Midlands Combined Authority would like to come in.
Lovely, yes. Oh, yes, Fiona, yes, I've just seen your hand. Good.
Oh,
Please do.
You never quite know whether you can see these things, can't you? First of all, Sam, well done on a presentation on the Adult Participation in Learning survey. I did that for 20 odd years. It's great to hand my baby over to you. I think you did a fabulous job, and there's some really interesting findings there. And my favourite chart on that is the one about the fact that kind of 4/5 of adults who've engaged in learning say that they want to do some more, but 4/5 of those who haven't say they don't plan to. And in one sense, that's a terrible picture. But the great thing is that if you can engage people and give them a successful first step opportunity, building their confidence, and we talked about confidence, then actually we can get them onto other things. So you needn't start with the most serious, the most useful piece of learning. It's about building people's confidence, and I know lots of people in the virtual room are very committed to doing that. On the bill, I loved the Lords debate actually, and I was particularly good to see so many well-informed people making a contribution. From the point of a combined authority, it was great to see people recognise that actually, if we're not going to undermine the work that we've done to strategically align provision to the needs of local communities and the local labour market, then we need to have a say in those LSIPs and in commissioning of work as well. Kind of an over competition of funds for skills has actually created an awful lot of duplication and waste, and that does our learners a disservice actually. So that regional planning, so it's great to see that debate, and then the government amendment to the bill. I guess it leaves me with a concern about what happens outside of those combined authorities, and how we make sure that if we're properly going to connect with adult learners and the jobs they might do and the communities they're in, then we do need to make sure there's proper engagement at a local level to make those things really, really work. Yes.
No, I agree with you. Yes, we had quite a debate on that side of things to try and make sure that could work. But we have quite a lot of people who know an awful lot about local authorities, of which I'm not one, I'm afraid. But and so that was a lively debate. So yes, so Fiona, you were learning and work before, were you?
I was learning and work, and I'm about 7 weeks into West Midlands Combined Authority, and
oh, are you? Oh, so you so you have a vested interest now. Oh, that's good.
Yes,
lovely.
Good to see it in practice.
Good. I can see that Simon's got his hand up, and so has Chris. So Simon, we'll come to you then.
Yeah, thank you. And it was just to respond to and say thank you for making the time, Fiona. You know, it's great to see you, and congratulations on your new role. And I think this is something that we're acutely aware of at the WEA. We're very roughly now 50% funded through ESFA for the non-devolved areas, and roughly 50%, through every mayoral authority in England, bar one. But it's really great. What I think we've noticed certainly over the last 6, 8, 9 months is that growing conversation with MCAs about the role that community learning provision, adult education provision can play on a regional level, and that actually it is a legitimate use of money to actually support people to get to the higher level technical qualification. So I think that's really pleasing. I think, that the MCAs in many ways will lead the charge on this. I think it's right that the government, the amendments to the skills bills are insisting that MCAs are part of the local skills improvement picture. Obviously, clearly, let's hope that amendment stays. And just our commitment to you as well, that we're absolutely committed to working with MCAs to really understand the difference that we can make across all the communities. So good to see the interest. Thanks for the interest from you and other colleagues on the call this afternoon. Chris, I know you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Simon. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and again, just building on the same point, and again, thank you to you, Baroness Garden, to others in the Lords for the amendments that you brought forward on this. And it's good to see, as we've just said, that the amendments which strengthen the connections to the MCAs, appear to be holding up, and that's really good. The amendments, however, that talk about engagement with providers seems to be going in the other direction, I'm afraid, and there seems to be a watering down of the involvement of providers in LSIPs. And my understanding at the moment, the debate is literally going on as we speak, is that the guidance might reflect how providers are engaged with, but it may not be on the face of the bill. So I think, if we're going to get the full picture, of what local needs look like, I think employers working alongside providers and working alongside MCAs where there are MCAs and other local authorities where it's non-devolved, I think that would create much stronger LSIPs.
Right, yes. And can I just say how much we value the briefings we get from all your different organisations when we have these bills, because it's really, really helpful, to let us know, because you're at the sharp edge of this. We're obviously slightly removed from it. It's a rather long time since I was teaching. But I was interested in what you said, Fiona, about trying to get people who have done some learning and they're enthusiastic about it. Years ago, I taught in a college in the balmy days when colleges did all these sort of free programs on all sorts of things. I was teaching French, but there were people doing all sorts of other things there. And there were people who got no confidence in learning, but they'd come along to these to get a taster, if it was flower arranging, whatever it happened to be, macrame, they had a lot of support for that. But once they'd started that then got them the confidence to go on to other things. And I think it's so important to get people who are resistant to learning or who've always found learning very, very frightening, to get them involved with something which interests them, where they can see that learning is not that frightening because it's quite exciting, because it's relevant to them. Anyway, are there any more questions? Is anybody else? I can't see any hands up. Any more hands, or anybody want to wave at me or just say something? Any more comments? As I say, I was really sorry to miss the start of this meeting, so it's a little bit difficult for me to say anything relevant about the speakers who I didn't hear. But yes, Chris, did you want to come back?
I think we're all good, Chair, and we're almost up to time.
We've only got about 2 minutes, haven't we? Yes.
Perhaps unless there are any final comments, we can just thank our speakers and just reassure everybody that hopefully we'll be back with more APPG meetings in 2022. Dates to be confirmed.
Would any of the speakers like a final word? No, you're
Baroness Garden, just
Simon, you're coming back again. Good on you.
Thank you. No, thank you, and thanks to you, Baroness Garden, for taking up the chair and covering for Margaret as well. And just thank you to all our colleagues on the call. It's great to see a full range of interested organisations, from policymakers, think tanks, through to providers, through to sort of some of our MCA colleagues as well. So just a massive thank you to you for taking up the chair, and thank you to everyone for giving up their time this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much. It's really good, and also to have Lloyd's here, as well as Learning and Work and WEA, is really valuable for us. So I think probably on that note, I'll just say it's really good to see you all, and we hope that we might even get some face-to-face meetings next year. But of course, don't hold out any hopes, will you? Because they'll have invented another version of the coronavirus by then, won't they? Anyway, so if it's not desperately too early, can I wish you all a happy Christmas? I got my first 2 Christmas cards today. I think I don't really want Christmas cards in November, but still. Anyway, but thank you all very much for being here, and have a really good end of the year. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. And thank you, Chris, for all you do for this APPG. Much appreciated. Okay, folks, right, because we've got half a minute, I think. So can I just say bye-bye and thank you very much.
Thanks
Cheerio.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.